The wolf was the size of a small horse. I want to be clear about that before this story goes anywhere. I am not exaggerating for effect. I am not using the poetic language of someone building atmosphere. When I say the wolf that appeared at the edge of my garden on that November evening was the size of a small horse, I mean that when I walked out to investigate the sound I'd heard from my kitchen, I stood there in my boots and my apron with a lantern in my hand, and I looked at the animal in my garden, and my brain did the specific thing brains do when they encounter something that is too large to immediately process. It just stalled. For 3 whole seconds, I stood there with the lantern, staring at the largest wolf I had ever seen in my life. Completely black. Not dark gray. Not very dark brown. Black. The kind of absolute black that absorbed the lantern light rather than reflecting it. And then my brain unstalled, and I registered 2 things simultaneously. The first, the wolf was not moving. It was lying on its side at the edge of my vegetable garden, and its chest was moving, but its legs were not, and its breathing had the specific labored quality of something in serious trouble. The second, there was a significant amount of blood. I said, out loud, to a wolf the size of a small horse that may or may not have understood me. Okay, don't panic. I was talking to myself. The wolf did not panic. The wolf was unconscious. I, however, was also not panicking, which surprised me, because I had a documented history of panicking at significantly less alarming things than an enormous unconscious bleeding wolf in my vegetable garden. What I did was go inside, get the supplies I kept for livestock emergencies. I lived on the edge of a forest, and I kept supplies for emergencies. This was not remarkable, and come back out. And I spent the next 6 hours doing the most consequential thing I had ever done, even though I did not know it at the time. I kept him alive. What I did not know, what I would not know for 3 days, until the wolf opened his eyes and the world around me changed completely, was who he was, what he was, and why 7 of the most powerful alpha wolves in the Northern Territory were going to be standing outside my cottage in 72 hours, looking for him. Like the video right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story is the one that's going to make you laugh and hold your breath and feel things you were not planning to feel today. Come with me to the beginning. Her name was Tansy Brell. And the first thing you needed to know about Tansy Brell was that she was, by her own honest assessment and the assessment of everyone who had known her for more than a week, a disaster. Not in the large, catastrophic sense. In the small, daily, relentless way. She dropped things. Not occasionally. Consistently. With a frequency and a range that had, over 27 years, ceased to surprise anyone who knew her and continued to surprise everyone who didn't. Cups, files, plates, books. One time, famously, a full tray of seedlings at the spring market that had resulted in an incident people in the village of Kethville still referred to as the seedling event. She walked into door frames. Not every time, not even most of the time, but with enough regularity that she had developed a specific technique for rubbing her shoulder afterward that was entirely automatic. She forgot things. Not important things, usually. Small things. Where she had put the scissors. Whether she had locked the gate. The word for that specific type of shelf bracket that she had known 3 minutes ago and now could not access. She tripped over things that were not there. This last one was the hardest to explain to people who had not witnessed it. The floor would be clear. Completely clear. And Tansy would be walking across it, and something would happen, some specific misalignment between her intention and her execution, and she would stumble over nothing, and recover, and continue, without comment, as if this were simply the price of locomotion. She was an omega, not the dramatic, downtrodden kind of omega that pack stories were sometimes told about. The ordinary kind. The kind that existed in the middle of pack life, doing the specific work that kept things running, the healing knowledge, the plant cultivation, the small-scale remedies and preparations that the pack's formal healer relied on as a supply network. She grew things. She made things. She knew which plants did what, and in what combinations, and at what time of year, and in what preparation. She was very good at this. She was so good at it that the pack's formal healer, a wolf named Groven who had been in the role for 12 years, had told her 6 months ago that her remedies were better than his own, which was one of the more startling things anyone had said to her in a professional context. She lived in a cottage at the edge of the Kethful Pack's territory. Not the social edge, the forest edge, the specific boundary where the Pack's cultivated land met the old forest, which was technically still within Kethful territory, but was the last piece of it, the furthest point from the main compound, the least visited, the most quiet. She had chosen it deliberately, not because she was antisocial, because she needed to be able to move through her own space without the specific social calculus of a pack environment, where her natural disaster tendencies had, over 27 years, generated a reputation that preceded her in rooms. She liked the quiet. She liked her garden. She liked the forest at the edge of her property, which she walked in the mornings and which had never, until the November evening in question, produced anything more alarming than a startled deer. The wolf that appeared in her garden on that evening was not a deer. The 6 hours were harder than she expected and more systematic than people would later give her credit for. She could not move him into the cottage. He was enormous and unconscious, and she was Tansy, which meant that attempting to drag a wolf the size of a small horse across her garden at night was a project that would end in her falling down at least twice, and probably achieving nothing except additional injuries for both of them. She brought the cottage to him. She made 3 trips in the first hour. Blankets, the supply kit, the lantern refueled, a second lantern, the specific salves and preparations that she kept for deep wounds and infection. She assessed the injuries with the methodical attention of someone who had spent years learning what bodies needed and had made peace with the fact that this knowledge applied to all bodies, not only the ones she had expected to use it on. The wounds were significant, not from a predator. The specific pattern of them told her that, clearly. These were from something that had edges and force behind it, something intentional, not claws or teeth, something that had been wielded. She cleaned them. She packed them. She set a compress on the deepest one, left flank, through the muscle, and held it with the specific pressure she knew was needed, and sat in her garden in the November dark, holding pressure on the wound of a wolf the size of a small horse. She talked to him, not for his benefit, she clarified to herself, for hers. Because sitting in complete silence in the dark while an enormous animal breathed laboriously beside her was the kind of situation that her nerves had opinions about, and talking kept the opinions from getting loud. She told him about the garden, what she was growing, what had done well this year, and what hadn't. The specific failure of the root vegetables, which she had expected to be excellent, and which had been, at best, modest. The unexpected success of the late herbs, which she had not expected to survive the early frosts and which had, apparently, decided to prove her wrong. She told him about the pack, about Groven and the remedies and the spring market and the seedling event, which she had decided she was going to stop being embarrassed about eventually and had not yet reached eventually. She told him, and this was the part she would later be glad he had not been conscious for, that she was lonely in the specific way of someone who had a full life and still felt the absence of something she couldn't entirely name. She talked until the bleeding slowed, and then until the breathing steadied, and then until the first gray light of morning came through the trees. And then she went inside, made herself tea, fell over the doorstep on the way in, caught herself on the door frame, and stood in her kitchen for a moment to acknowledge that she had just spent the night in her garden with an enormous unconscious wolf, and that the wolf appeared to be, if not well, then at least significantly less in danger of dying than he had been 6 hours ago. She drank her tea. She went back out to check the compress. The wolf was still there, still breathing. She took this as a good sign. Day 2 was quieter. He was still unconscious for most of it, but the breathing was more stable and the deepest wound, when she changed the compress, was showing the early signs of proper healing rather than the concerning signs of the alternative. Wolf healing was, she knew, faster than most other things. The biology ran differently. What would take a human weeks took a wolf days, if the conditions were managed correctly. She managed the conditions correctly. This was what she did. She brought water. She had found, by the end of day 1, that she could get water close enough to him that it was accessible if he roused, and she had made this happen without knocking anything over, which she regarded as a minor personal triumph. She changed the compress twice. She added a preparation to the wound treatment that she had been developing for the past year, an experimental combination that Groven had been skeptical of, and that she had been testing on small livestock wounds with results that had, quietly and without announcement, been excellent. She talked to him again. Less this time. More comfortable with the silence than she had been the first night. She was learning, she reflected, that very large, unconscious wolves were actually reasonably good company in their way. They didn't require anything specific from you. They didn't look at you with the expression of someone who had heard about the seedling event. They just lay there, breathing, which was, in its own way, restful. She was in the middle of a completely unguarded thought about whether it was strange that she was more comfortable with an unconscious wolf than with most conscious people, when he opened his eyes. She was sitting 2 feet away, checking the compress, and he opened his eyes. Very dark eyes. Almost black, like his coat. Extremely alert for something that had been unconscious for 32 hours. They looked at each other. She did not panic. She held very still and looked at him and thought, with the specific calm of someone who had been talking to this wolf for 2 days and had therefore established at least a one-directional relationship. Okay. This is the part where things either go well or they don't. Stay calm. The wolf looked at her. He looked at the compress on his flank. He looked at the water. He looked back at her. Then he put his head back down. Not in a threatening way. In the way of something that has assessed the situation and made a determination that the situation does not require immediate action. She breathed. "Good morning," she said, because she had been talking to him for 2 days, and stopping now felt wrong. "The wound is healing. I changed the compress an hour ago. You should drink the water when you're able to." He looked at the water, then at her. Something in his eyes that she could not name, but that registered as intelligent. Deeply, specifically intelligent. In a way that was different from the intelligence of other wolves she had encountered, which was the intelligence of animals. This was something else. She filed this thought for later. "I'm Tansy," she said. "This is my garden. You appeared in it 2 nights ago, and you were in serious trouble, so I've been managing the wound. You're going to be fine. It'll take a few more days, but you're going to be fine." He was looking at her with that dark, specific intelligence. "I'm an Omega," she added, in case this was relevant information. "I'm not. You don't need to worry about the pack hierarchy situation. I'm not going to report you to anyone. I don't actually know who you are, so there's nothing to report anyway." He blinked. She had the distinct impression, which she was aware was possibly a sign that she had not slept enough, that the blink was deliberate, that it was expressive. "Okay," she said. "We're going to work with what we have." She went inside to make more compress preparation. She walked into the doorstep on the way, caught herself on the frame. From behind her, from the direction of the garden, she heard a sound that she could not quite categorize. She turned. The wolf's chest was moving in a way that was different from breathing. She stared. Was the wolf laughing? She turned back around and went inside without comment. He shifted on the morning of the 3rd day. She was in the garden when it happened. She had come to check the compress and had been crouching beside him, not touching, assessing the wound's color from a distance. And she had approximately 3 seconds of warning from the specific quality of stillness that came over him before the shift happened. She had seen wolves shift before. It was not unusual. It was not alarming. The size of the wolf shifting was alarming, because what came out of the shift was not a modestly sized male. What came out of the shift was large, very large. 6'4" of large, and broad in the way of someone whose physical size was not constructed, but simply inherent. And he was lying in her garden in the specific state of a person who has just shifted out of an injured wolf form and is now experiencing all of those injuries in a human body that does not have the same healing advantage. He made a sound, not dramatic, just the specific involuntary sound of pain. She was already moving. She realized, been preparing for this. Somewhere in the back of her practical brain, she had understood that an unconscious injured wolf eventually becomes a conscious injured human, and she had, without fully articulating it, been thinking about what that required. She had blankets. She had clothes. She kept things for the hedge wolves who sometimes needed them, which was a function of living at the forest edge. She had the remedy preparation that worked on human wounds as well as wolf ones, because the base biology was the same, and she had always made her preparations with both applications in mind. She managed. She was not graceful about it. She knocked over the water vessel. She dropped the blanket once before getting it into position. She said, sorry, twice for no reason that she could afterwards identify. But she managed. He was covered and tended and sitting upright against the garden wall when he opened his eyes the second time. And this time the eyes were human and dark and contained the same quality of intelligence she had identified in the wolf form, amplified by the addition of a face she could read. He looked at her. She looked at him. She was going to be honest with herself. Extraordinarily good-looking in the way that felt like an unfair addition to an already challenging situation. Strong-featured, with the dark hair that was the human extension of the wolf's coat, and the jaw of someone who had never been uncertain about their right to occupy space, and the eyes that were doing the specific thing eyes did when the person behind them was taking in an enormous amount of information very quickly. "You're the one who did this," he said. His voice was low, rough from disuse and injury, with a specific quality that she registered before she understood it. "Done what?" she said. He indicated the compress, the blankets, the water. "Yes," she said. "You appeared in my garden." "I know where I appeared," he said. "I was aware for some of it. I heard you." She felt something that was not quite embarrassment and not quite mortification, but was in the general territory of both. "I talk when I'm nervous," she said. "You told me about the seedling event," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. "You were conscious for that part," she said. "I was drifting in and out," he said. "I was conscious enough to hear, not conscious enough to respond." A pause. The root vegetables this year did sound disappointing. She opened her eyes. He was looking at her with an expression that was not what she expected. Not the composed, contained quality of a dominant wolf in a managed situation. Something warmer than that. Something that might, if she looked at it directly, be called amused. "What's your name?" she said. Direct, because she was direct when she was flustered, and she was flustered. He was quiet for a moment. The specific moment of someone making a decision about information. "Verith," he said. Just that. One name. No pack designation. No rank title, nothing that would tell her more than the syllables. She accepted this. "I'm Tansy," she said. "Tansy Brell. You're in my garden, which is on the east edge of Kethful territory. The nearest pack compound is 40 minutes on foot." She paused. "You're in no condition to walk anywhere yet. The wound is healing, but you need at least 2 more days before you attempt significant movement." He looked at her steadily. "I can't stay here 2 days," he said. "I understand that may feel that way," she said. "But your flank wound is deep enough that if you shift and run before the muscle heals properly, you're going to reopen it. And reopening it in the field, without the specific preparation I've been using, is going to put you back where you were 2 nights ago." He looked at the compress. He looked at her. "What preparation?" he said. She told him. The specific combination, the mechanism of action, why it was working faster than standard treatment. She watched him listen, not with the polite listening of someone waiting for information to stop so they could respond, but with genuine technical attention. "Where did you learn that?" he said. "I developed it," she said. Over about a year of testing. You developed it, he said. As if this was information he was placing alongside other information. I know plants, she said. It's what I do. He was quiet for a moment. 2 days, he said. 2 days, she confirmed. Possibly 3. I'll assess again tomorrow. He nodded. Then I need to send word, he said. To the people who will be looking for me. That's reasonable, she said. There's a communication relay in Kethville compound. If you give me a message, I can get it sent. He looked at her for a long moment. I'll write it, he said. If you can provide paper. She brought paper. He wrote something. Short. She did not read it. She was not in the habit of reading other people's correspondence, and his tone had been specific enough that she understood this was confidential. She sealed it, as he asked. She took it to the compound relay. She did not read the name on the outside until she had been walking for 20 minutes and was too far along to turn back. The name on the outside of the message was not a name. It was a title. It said, "The First of the Northern Council, for immediate delivery to the Arvith Reach, Velther Reach, and Dunfeld territory." She stopped walking in the middle of the forest path. She looked at the sealed message in her hand. She thought about the wolf the size of a small horse. She thought about a man named Verith who had given her one name and no pack designation. She thought about the First of the Northern Council, which was a title she knew from the administrative structures of the Northern Pacts. A title that was held by exactly one person. The Alpha King of the Kethmore Alliance. The Supreme Sovereign of the 12-Pack Northern Coalition. A man whose formal name she had seen in administrative documents exactly once, in passing, and which she had not retained because it had not seemed relevant to her life. She stood in the forest path and understood, with the specific clarity of someone whose practical brain had just connected all the available information into a conclusion, that the man currently sitting in her garden against her garden wall in borrowed clothes was not simply a very large dominant wolf who had been injured and needed help. He was the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territory, and she had told him about the seedling event. She delivered the message. She walked home. She walked into the doorstep. She caught herself on the frame. From the garden, she heard the sound she had heard before. The wolf, the man, was laughing. Openly this time. Not the contained amusement of before. Actually laughing, with the specific quality of someone who had been controlling something and had just let the control go. She stood in the doorway. You already knew, she said. I thought it was likely, he said. When you ran into the doorstep the first time. She stared at him. The Alpha King of the Kethmore Alliance, she said. Who knows about the seedling event? I didn't know about the seedling event before last night, he said. But I feel I know it quite well now. She went inside and made tea. She made enough for 2. She brought it out. She sat down across from him in the garden. Start talking, she said. Because I just sent a message on your behalf to the First of the Northern Council, and I would like to understand what is happening in my garden. His name was Verith Kethmore. He was 36 years old. He had been the Alpha King of the Kethmore Alliance, the coalition of 12 northern packs that operated under a unified sovereignty, for 7 years, since his father had formally abdicated following a health crisis that had made the transfer both necessary and relatively undisputed. He was, by the accounting of the Northern Territory, the most politically significant wolf in 1,000 miles. He was also, as of 72 hours ago, the target of an assassination attempt. Not the first one, the third. The previous 2 had been less successful. The first because the people involved had not understood his security structure and had been intercepted at the outer perimeter. The second because he had been somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, which had been fortunate. The third had been more sophisticated. He had been on a survey of the eastern border territories, an annual function, not announced publicly, which meant the information had come from inside his inner circle. The ambush had been coordinated, 7 wolves, positioned along the path he had been taking, with weapons that were not standard wolf conflict weapons. The specific, clinical kind. The kind that was brought when the goal was not to win a fight, but to ensure an outcome. He had won the fight. He had not won it cleanly. He had gotten far enough to shift. The shift was always the advantage, because no human weapon was designed for the speed of a full shift, and run far enough that the pursuit had lost him in the forest. And then the wounds, which he had been managing through adrenaline and necessity, had caught up with him. And he had found, at the edge of the forest and the edge of his ability to continue, a garden, and a cottage, and a light in the window. He had not expected the person with the light to come out. He had certainly not expected her to sit down next to him and start cleaning his wounds. She listened to this without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The inner circle," she said carefully. "The information about your route. You know who had access to it." "I know who should have had access to it," he said. "There are 7 people. And you've been running the accounting in your head for 3 days?" she said. "Yes." She looked at the garden. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "The message I sent," she said. "The first of the Northern Council. That's your senior administration?" "The top tier of it, yes." "And you're telling them you're alive, but not where you are." "Correct." She turned to look at him. "Because one of the 7 people who knew your route might also have contact with the first." He held her gaze. "You're perceptive," he said. "I'm an Omega who lives alone at the edge of a forest," she said. "I read people carefully because it's a practical survival skill." She paused. "How long do you need?" "To do what?" he said. "To figure out which of the 7, she said. "You've been running it. What are you missing?" He was quiet. "Access records," he said slowly. "The route survey files. There were access logs. Who opened the files, when? I can't access those remotely without going through the administrative channel, and the administrative channel is monitored." "Can you access them through a secondary route?" she said. "A secondary route requires a terminal with specific authorization," he said. "The Kethful Pack compound has an administrative terminal," she said, "with external network connection. Groven, the pack healer, has access clearance for the regional medical network, which runs on the same backbone as the administrative network." He stared at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "I deliver remedies to Groven twice a month," she said. "He always complains when the network is slow. I understand more about what he's complaining about than he does." Vareth Kethmore, Alpha King of the Northern Alliance, looked at her in her garden with an expression she had never seen on anyone's face before. It was completely undone. Not in a bad way. In the way of someone who has been managing an enormous problem and has just encountered an angle they had not considered and had not expected, and which might be exactly what they needed. "You're an Omega who lives at the edge of a forest," he said. "Yes," she said. "Who develops her own wound treatment protocols," he said. "Yes." "And understands pack administrative network architecture." "Not architecture, exactly," she said. "I just pay attention when people complain." He was looking at her. "Tansy," he said. Her name. She registered it the way she had learned to register things from him, with the specific attention of someone who understood that when this man said something, he had chosen to say it. "Yes," she said. "I need your help," he said. Simply, without management or calculation. Not just with the wound. With the access problem. With figuring out which of the 7. She looked at her hands. She thought about an Omega who lived alone at the edge of a forest, with a garden and a cottage and a comfortable, quiet life that she had built precisely to be comfortable and quiet. She thought about the size of what she was being asked to step into. She thought about the 7 wolves. The access logs. The network backbone. The senior pack healer who always complained when the connection was slow. She thought about the man in her garden who had been the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territory and who was currently sitting against her garden wall in borrowed clothes, asking for help with the specific honesty of someone who had decided that honest was the only available register. "Okay," she said. They worked for 2 days. Not dramatically. Not in the action sequence sense. In the methodical, patient, thoroughly unglamorous sense of 2 people working through a complex information problem with the tools available to them. She went to Groven. She did not lie to him. She told him she needed access to the administrative network through his terminal for a purpose she could not fully explain, but that was important. She told him the access logs she was looking for were specifically in the route survey file system. Groven looked at her. He said, "Is this about the large injured wolf that Mrs. Pinnock saw going into your garden 3 nights ago that everyone in the village has been quietly not talking about?" She stared at him. "Mrs. Pinnock," she said. "Mrs. Pinnock sees everything," he said. "She has always seen everything. We've all just agreed not to discuss it openly." He paused. "Is the wolf going to be all right?" "He's going to be fine," she said. "The wound is healing well." "Good," he said. "The terminal is in the back." She accessed the route survey files. She found the access logs. She brought them back to the garden in a copied format, which Groven had printed with the specific air of a man whose terminal had never been used for anything this consequential and who was mildly thrilled about it. Verith went through the logs with the precision of someone who understood exactly what they were looking at and knew which detail mattered. She watched him work. She noticed the specific quality of his concentration, the way it was total without being aggressive, directed without being rigid. She noticed the way he moved through information, which was like the way she moved through a complex remedy formulation, not linear, but layered, building a picture from multiple angles simultaneously. She noticed that he had, over 2 days of working together, stopped managing how he presented himself to her. On the first day, he had maintained a specific quality of careful presentation, the composed, contained manner of someone in a position of authority who was accustomed to being the most significant person in a room. By the end of the second day, that had given way to something more immediate, more direct, the specific quality of someone who had stopped calculating the impression they were making and was simply there. She noticed this because she was perceptive. She noticed this also because her own body had been doing things for 2 days that her body did not usually do, and she was in the habit of being honest with herself about her body. The bond. She had not said it. She was not going to say it. Not yet. Not while he was injured in her garden under complicated political circumstances. But she felt it. And she was fairly certain, from watching his face when he looked at her, the specific quality of looking that was different from the functional attention of someone working through a problem, that he felt it too. She did not name it. She made him more tea. She dropped the cup. She caught it before it hit the ground, which was a personal best. He made the sound again. She pointed at him. "Don't," she said. He pressed his mouth together. His eyes were doing the thing. "I didn't say anything," he said. "You were going to," she said. "I was going to say that the catch was impressive," he said. She looked at him. "You were not," she said. He was definitely going to say something about the catch not being impressive, but he chose not to. She gave him the tea. The 4th name on the access log was one he had not expected. She watched his face when he found it. There was a specific quality to the stillness that arrived, not the composed, managed stillness of his operational mode. The stillness of someone who has found something that hurts. Not just politically, personally. She did not ask immediately. She waited. "His name is Pale," he said finally. "He has been my second in command for 4 years. Before that, he was my father's second for 6 years." She breathed. "Someone you trusted," she said. "Someone I trusted completely," he said. She was quiet. "Why?" she said. "Not about Pale's guilt." That was the access log's answer. "About the motivation. The deeper question. There are people," Verith said slowly, "who believe the alliance is stronger without the unified sovereignty structure. Who believe the 12 packs would do better as independent territories than as a coalition." He paused. "Pale has family in 3 of the eastern packs. If the alliance dissolved, those packs would gain considerable autonomy, considerable territory." Another pause. "I have known he had family interests there. I thought they were separate from his professional role." "They weren't," she said. "No." He looked at the log. "They weren't." She looked at the garden, at the morning light coming through the trees. "What happens now?" she said. "I send the information to the 1st," he said. "Through the right channel. Pale doesn't have direct oversight of the first's office, so the channel is clean from that end. And then I return. She nodded. He looked at her. I need to ask you something, he said. She waited. The access work, he said. What I've asked of you over the past 2 days. The exposure. If Pale's people understand what happened here, that someone helped me identify him. I know, she said. It puts you in a position. I know, she said again. I made that calculation before I agreed. Tansy. She looked at him. I would like to tell you something, he said. Okay, she said. The bond, he said. The garden went quiet. I know, she said for the third time, but differently. Softer. I am not. I don't want to manage this while I have a complicated political situation that includes a compromised inner circle and a return to my territory and the process of dealing with a betrayal from someone I trusted for 10 years. He looked at her directly. What I want to do is tell you that it's real, what I feel, and that I would like it to not be something that the political situation determines. She breathed. What does that mean practically, she said. It means I'm going to leave, he said. Because I have to. And I'm going to deal with what I have to deal with. And then I'm going to come back. She looked at him. To my garden, she said. To you, he said. She held his gaze. I have one condition, she said. Yes. You come back because you want to be here, she said. Not because of the bond, not because of gratitude, not because of the access logs. Because this, she indicated the garden, the cottage, herself, is where you want to be. He was quiet for a moment. Tansy, he said. Yes. I spent 3 days unconscious in your garden, he said, and 2 days awake in it. And in those 2 days, I have not once, he stopped. Started again. I have not once felt the specific quality of being in the right place that I have felt sitting in this garden, working through this problem, with the person who makes better wound preparations than trained healers and understands administrative network architecture from listening to someone complain and catches cups before they hit the ground and talks to unconscious wolves about root vegetables. She stared at him. I talked to you about the root vegetables before you were conscious, she said. I know, he said. I regained consciousness somewhere around the part where the root vegetables were below expectations and stayed conscious for the part about the late herbs. The late herbs were apparently very determined. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. You've been conscious since day one, she said. Drifting, he said. Not fully, but enough to hear. And enough to, he paused. Enough to understand, before I could do anything about it, that the person talking to me was someone I wanted to keep hearing. She looked at the garden. She thought about 3 days of talking to a wolf. She thought about the seedling event. She thought about her lonely, specific loneliness, named out loud in the dark, to someone she had believed was unconscious. You heard the lonely part, she said. Yes, he said quietly. She looked at her hands. That was private, she said. I know, he said. I want you to know that I heard it as something real, not as information I'm using, as the truest thing you said. She breathed. Come back when it's done, she said. The Pale situation, the inner circle, all of it. Come back when you've dealt with all of it and you know what you want. I know what I want, he said. Then come back and tell me again when the garden isn't in the middle of a political crisis, she said. Something happened in his expression that she was going to think about for a long time. It was not the composed, contained face of the Alpha King. It was not the warm, amused face of the man who had laughed at her doorstep situation. It was something underneath both of those. Something that was simply present, unhidden. The face of someone who had been carrying enormous things for a long time and had, in a garden at the edge of a forest, put them down. Okay, he said. He left the following morning. Clean wound. Changed compress. Directions for the next 3 days of treatment that he would have to manage himself, which she wrote down in detail because she was thorough. She walked him to the forest edge. Tansy, he said at the edge. She looked at him. The late herbs, he said. The determined ones. How late did they go? She felt the corner of her mouth do something. I'll tell you when you come back, she said. He nodded. He went into the forest. She went back to the cottage. She walked into the doorstep. She stood in the doorway for a moment, with the forest behind her and the garden in front of her and the morning light on everything. And she thought, come back, come back, come back, come back. She went inside. She made tea. She did not drop anything. This felt significant. He came back in 6 weeks. Not alone. He came with 2 members of his administrative staff and a formal security detail, which was the minimum he had apparently been able to negotiate with his inner circle's replacement members, who had very strong feelings about the Alpha King traveling without adequate protection following the 3rd assassination attempt. But the administrative staff and the security detail stopped at the Kethful compound. He came to the cottage alone. He knocked on the door. She opened it. He was in his own clothes this time. Not borrowed. The specific well-made, functional clothes of someone who dressed for use rather than display, and who had good taste without performing it. He looked at her. She looked at him. The late herbs, he said. She laughed. She had not been expecting to laugh. She had been expecting to be composed. She had been preparing to be composed for 6 weeks. And instead she laughed. The specific, genuine laugh of someone who has been holding something with care for a long time and has just been given permission to set it down. He came in. She made tea. She did not drop anything, and she was going to note this because she felt it was worth noting. They sat at the kitchen table and she told him about the late herbs, genuinely, in full detail, because the late herbs had continued to be extraordinary through the late autumn, and she had been thinking about how to explain this to someone who would understand why it mattered. He listened. He asked the specific question that showed he had understood what she was telling him. She answered it. And then she said, the pale situation. How did it resolve? He told her. Fully, without the managed version. The formal tribunal process, the specific evidence from the access logs, the additional information that had emerged during the investigation, the outcome, formal conviction, dissolution of rank standing, the specific consequences for the 3 Eastern pacts whose interests Pale had been serving. She listened. She asked 2 questions, both precise. He answered both. And the inner circle, she said. The new second. The new second is someone who has been in my administration for 6 years, he said. She has a record of exactly the kind of transparency that makes a good second. He paused. Her name is Briva. She is, incidentally, the one who identified the secondary route of the access log before I even sent the information. She had been tracking anomalies in the file access patterns independently. She was already suspicious, Tansy said. She was being thorough, he said. Tansy looked at her teacup. Good second, she said. Very good second, he agreed. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the garden was gray-brown in the November afternoon, the late herbs gone dormant, the vegetable beds turned over for winter. You came back, she said. I said I would, he said. You said you would when the situation was dealt with, she said. And you knew what you wanted. Yes, he said. And, she said. He looked at her across the kitchen table. I sat in a garden for 2 days, he said, with a woman who developed her own wound treatments and understood the administrative network from listening to complaints and caught cups before they hit the ground and talked to me about root vegetables when she thought I was unconscious. He paused. And I have spent 6 weeks dealing with a betrayal and a tribunal and an inner circle rebuild and a political structure that required constant management. And the thing that I came back to, in every quiet moment, was this kitchen table. She breathed. The table specifically, she said. The table, he confirmed. And the person sitting at it. She looked at her hands. I'm clumsy, she said. Consistently. Without improvement. I've been this way for 27 years. I know, he said. I live at the edge of a forest in a small cottage, and I talk to unconscious animals, and I had a publicly documented incident involving seedlings that I'm still managing my feelings about. I know, he said again. And you're the Alpha King of the 12-pack Northern Alliance, she said. Yes, he said. Those things are very different, she said. They are, he agreed. You're considerably better at wound treatment than I am. I've never successfully developed a preparation from scratch. She stared at him. That's not, she stopped. I know what you're saying, he said. And I want to be honest with you about what the differences mean practically. There are things that would change. About your life. About the quiet. About the forest edge. He looked at her steadily. And I'm not going to tell you those things don't exist, or that they're manageable without any cost. They exist, and they have cost, and you deserve to know that clearly before anything else. She held his gaze. But, she said, but there is no version of having been in this garden that ends with me being able to go back to the territory without understanding what this is, he said. I have been the alpha king of 12 packs for 7 years. I know how to make decisions based on complete information. And the complete information is this. He put his hand flat on the table. Between them. Not reaching. Present. She looked at it. She thought about 6 weeks of a kitchen table in the back of her mind during remedies and late herbs and Groven's complaints. She thought about a wolf the size of a small horse and a night in a garden and the specific quiet of being more comfortable with something enormous than with most ordinary things. She put her hand over his. Start with the details, she said. The practical ones. What changes and what doesn't. And we'll work from there. Yes, he said. And then he said, can I ask you something? Yes. The seedling event, he said. Was it really that bad? She looked at him. There were 300 seedlings, she said. And a market full of people. And a downhill slope. He pressed his mouth together. I'm going to need the full account, he said. You are absolutely not getting the full account, she said. He was smiling. She was too. And the kitchen was warm, and the garden was gray-brown and dormant outside the window, and the forest was at the edge of it all, and for the first time in a very long time, the cottage felt exactly the right size. The practical details were significant. She had not been wrong about that, and he had not minimized them. There were things that changed. The security arrangement, which she had strong feelings about, and which she negotiated, with more success than the security detail expected, down to something that was present without being intrusive. She won this argument by pointing out, with specific examples from her 2 days of access log work, that intrusive security that everyone could see coming was less effective than quiet security that people forgot was there. The security team lead, a pragmatic wolf named Duvra, said she had a point. She went to the compound twice a month rather than twice a day, which was her existing rhythm, but on a larger scale. She moved her remedy operation to a larger space, still at the forest edge, but the specific cottage that had been empty at the edge of the Kethmore Alliance's administrative compound, which had a better garden than her original one and a door frame that she negotiated with in the same way she negotiated with all door frames. Groven was officially devastated and unofficially extremely proud, which was the right combination. Orvin, the Kethmore Administrative Archive Chief, who she had not met before moving to the compound, said, on first encountering her remedy organization system, "Who organized this?" She said, "I did." He looked at it for a long time, and then said, "Would you like to consult on the archive's cataloging system?" She said, "I am an Omega herbalist who got here by accident." He said, "Those are not disqualifying characteristics." They had been working together on Tuesdays ever since. The bond was formalized in the spring, not with enormous ceremony. Vareth had asked her what she wanted, and she had said small, because she was the kind of person who needed the significant things to be real rather than large, and he had said yes without negotiating. The small ceremony included Groven, who cried, Duvra, who did not, but made a specific expression that people who knew her understood was equivalent. Orvin, who brought an unnecessarily detailed gift that reflected his deep feelings expressed through cataloging systems. And Briva, the new second, who shook Tansy's hand at the reception and said, "The access log reconstruction was excellent work." Tansy said, "I just pay attention when people complain." Briva looked at her steadily and said, "Keep doing that." She kept doing that. On the day of the formal ceremony, she walked up the 2 steps to the elder's platform. She had memorized the steps. She walked them correctly. She turned to look at Verith, who was looking at her with the expression, the one that was underneath everything. Unhidden. Present. She looked back. The elders said the words. Verith said his. She said hers. And in the moment after, she heard Groven definitely not crying to her left, and felt the spring light on her face, and thought about a November evening, and a lantern, and a wolf the size of a small horse. And she thought, well, there is something I want to say about clumsiness. Not Tansy specifically, clumsiness in general. Because the story would be easy to tell as, and despite being clumsy, she was extraordinary. As if the clumsiness was the obstacle and the extraordinariness was the triumph over it. But that's not what happened. The clumsiness was never the obstacle. It was never the thing that stood between her and something she deserved. It was just part of her, part of who she was. The same part of her that talked to unconscious animals and made preparations from scratch and listened carefully when people complained and caught cups before they hit the ground and knew exactly what a deep wound needed at 11 o'clock at night in a November garden. The clumsiness and the competence were not opposites. They were the same person. And the thing that found her, in the dark, in a garden, at the edge of a forest, did not find her despite the doorstep. It found her because of the light in the window, because she went out. Because when she found something enormous and in trouble, she didn't calculate what it was worth to help. She just helped, with what she had, in the conditions available. That is the story underneath the story. Not, she saved someone powerful and was rewarded. But, she was exactly who she was, in her own space, doing her own work, and exactly who she was turned out to be exactly right for exactly this. Be exactly who you are, in your own space, doing your own work. You don't know who is going to appear in your garden, but they will find the light in your window, and they will stay. You've been here the whole time. You were there for the November garden and the 6 hours and the compress and the conversation about root vegetables. You were there for the access logs and the seedling event and the doorstep and the cup that didn't fall. You felt it. Not just the love story. The thing underneath it. The thing about being exactly yourself in your own space and having that be enough. More than enough. The exact right thing. This channel is for that story. Every week. A story about ordinary people, omega herbalists at the forest edge, mid-tier archivists, overlooked daughters, quiet wolves who pay attention, who turn out to be exactly right for something extraordinary. Not because they changed, because they stayed exactly who they were. If this story gave you something today, if one moment of it found the right place, then I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Not later. Now. Because every week we come back here and we tell another story about someone like you. Someone who is exactly themselves. Someone who has a doorstep they walk into and a garden they tend and a light in the window. And we tell you, stay exactly who you are. Your garden is the right garden. Your light is the right light. Subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. Share this with the person in your life who has been told they're too much, or not enough, or just too clumsy to matter. Tell them, you are exactly right. Exactly as you are. And drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because you showed up today, you stayed through the whole garden. You caught the cup. And that is everything. See you next week.